The NBA trade market is starting to get spicy, and that's expected around this time of year. Anthony Davis' future in Dallas is all of a sudden even more shaky than before. Trae Young's trade options are way thinner than expected, and Zion Williamson might actually be on the move. We're breaking it all down and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. My name is Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And we're going to start off talking about Anthony Davis. There's been a lot of talk recently about Anthony Davis and what's going on with him. Well, recently it came out from yesterday from Clutch Sports is that Rich Paul and Anthony Davis are not expected to reach a contract extension with the Dallas Mavericks, which could lead even more pressure from Anthony Davis and Rich Paul to try to press for a trade. Reportedly, that Rich Paul pressed the Mavs into being more aggressive at looking into the veteran big man trade market. Things between Davis and Dallas haven't turned sour, but it's becoming clear that the player doesn't see a future for himself with the Mavericks. Now, it's been a lot of back and forth after the Dallas Mavericks, fired their GM and they decided to go back to the basketball committee. Mark Cuban gained some power over basketball operations. Mark Cuban had mentioned how, they were going to hold on to Anthony Davis. That they were trying to win now. They weren't trying to necessarily trade everyone. And then probably about a week or two after that, things started happening. They are opening and trading Anthony Davis and more so building around Cooper Flag and, going younger and trying to stack assets that even, Kyrie Irving could be moved eventually as well. And I think that's a smart place to go for this Mavericks team. This is a Mavericks team that has toughed out some tough wins. They reportedly they do want to kind of see some time with Kyrie Irving to get back out there on the court before they make any decisions. But I think ultimately it's kind of best to just retool and go younger, right? And use the players that you do have that may have some interest around the NBA. Use those players that you do have to kind of stack some assets like other teams have done so you can start building around Cooper in the way that you need to build around Cooper. But there's something to say as well about keeping a solid team around him and trying to compete for the play-in so you're actually competing for something. The Mavericks has won 14 games. They're 14-23 in the Western Conference and in the NBA, so far this season. So that doesn't paint itself as like this team that's going to be amazing at any point this year. You've done everything between play Cooper at point guard to other things. And, that's something that Jason Kidd also did with Giannis to help Giannis grow as a playmaker and stuff like that. But I think at this point, especially now that we're in January, hell, this next week we'll be in the middle of January, that you have to make some decisions right now for what you want your team to look like. And, it makes some sense. So with that said, there are a number of teams that could be interested in Anthony Davis. This one comes from Sam Amick of The Athletic. He says the Hawks, Raptors, Warriors, Bucks all have interest in trading for Anthony Davis, saying if Dallas Mavericks chooses to trade Anthony Davis, they reportedly got teams lined up with interest. The Atlanta Hawks, Toronto Raptors, Golden State Warriors, and Milwaukee Bucks have all shown varying levels of interest in acquiring Davis. Atlanta's in the process of trying to find a trade for Trae Young. They could wrap a Davis acquisition into a Trae Young trade, with the guard acting as the primary salary matching in the deal. The Hawks could use any flexibility obtained after trading Young to go after Davis, possibly with Kristaps Porzingis as a large chunk of the necessary outgoing salary. So it seems like the Atlanta Hawks have a number or a couple of different avenues that they can go to try and acquire Trae Young, whether that it's involving in a much larger trade with Trae Young and Anthony Davis going to new homes, and maybe it's a third team in there that's going to take one of those because reportedly the Dallas Mavericks don't really have a huge interest in Trae Young. You could do that. Or the Mavericks could look at it similarly to what we heard about the Wizards as far as then acquiring Trae Young and then looking to move him once he opts in, maybe in the offseason or during next season, and gaining even more assets. The Raptors reportedly are interested in adding front court depth, which we have heard before, and they would have to send back long-term contracts, which is something that the Mavericks do want to avoid. So it's putting some difficulty possibly on the Raptors acquiring Anthony Davis. And then as far as the Warriors, it says this: getting to matching salary for Davis is difficult. With Golden State unwilling to include Jimmy Butler or Draymond Green, it's nearly impossible for them to trade for the Mavs big man. So while the Warriors may have some interest in acquiring Anthony Davis, it seems like they don't have the right contract matching to get that done with what they want to hold on to with their roster. As far as the Milwaukee Bucks, they said that they do want to add talent around Giannis Antetokounmpo as opposed to trading him, which we've heard that before. That's not a surprise at all that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to try to do everything they can to convince Giannis to stay there until he finally asks out. But it seems like right now they don't have much in the form of draft capital. They have the expiring contracts. They can match that. But the asking price that the Mavs have of the draft capital could be what's holding that back. So while the Mavs have some reported suitors, none of them are perfect. And maybe the one that does end up being perfect because of a mix of assets and expirings and things like that, it may end up being the Atlanta Hawks. But the Hawks have their first order of business of getting rid of Trae Young and then figuring some things out there. Now, if they can get rid of Trae Young, get some flexibility, then move Kristaps as well in the AD trade, they seem like maybe the most likely team right now. I'm sure there are going to be other teams that pop up. More than likely, if Anthony Davis is moved, and maybe none of these teams, and it could be completely a surprise team that takes all of us by surprise, which happens a lot, especially when you keep hearing the same rumors over and over again. But we shall see how this works out. But let me know what you guys think down below. Does Anthony Davis end up getting moved? And if he is moved, is it to the Hawks, the Raptors, the Warriors, or the Bucks? Or do you have another team that you think could have an outside chance on acquiring Anthony Davis? You know that the Chicago Bulls have been mentioned. My Bulls have been mentioned before. I think the Detroit Pistons were mentioned at one point. Then we heard that the Pistons don't really want to add long-term salary of that magnitude, which makes some sense there. So let me know what you guys think on that down below. With that said, the other piece that a lot of teams are waiting for are reportedly Trae Young, right? And reportedly, we heard yesterday that the Washington Wizards are a team to look out for to acquire Trae Young. But apparently, the Hawks are waiting to see if any other team pops up other than Trae Young. This one comes from Jake Fisher, who says the Hawks want to see whether another team emerges with interest in acquiring Young closer to the February 5th deadline. But there have been no other public and confirmed teams with interest in trading for Young at this point beyond the Wizards. Sources also tell Fisher that the Wizards have been monitoring the possibility of acquiring Young ever since he and the Hawks didn't agree to an extension in the offseason. The Wizards currently project to have $80 million in cap space during the 2026 offseason, and their ability to reach a salary cap floor is being monitored by rival cap strategists. They have to spend the money somewhere. So it seems like it's a combination of things that could lead the Wizards to wanting to be being interested in Trae Young, and they've been watching that. They do need to get to the salary floor, which is something I didn't even think about when I was talking about the deal on yesterday's episode. So there's a salary floor that you have to get. He has a $49 million player option for next year, and it seems and everybody's waiting to see, is he going to opt out of that? Is he going to – I do think if he's traded, any team that probably trades for him is going to want him to opt into that as part of the trade just to kind of guarantee that. But reportedly, there are some other teams that do have some interest but aren't necessarily pursuing a trade right now, and that is the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Brooklyn Nets that are reportedly interested in making a move for Trae Young. And so that's interesting. Reportedly, Trae Young's camp has proposed the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Brooklyn Nets as attractive trade destination if he and Atlanta work on his exit, but neither team is currently interested in the deal. And that is not really surprising, right? I think I talked about it on yesterday's episode. Even when you look at, for example, like the Minnesota Timberwolves, who do need a point guard, acquiring one of the contract size of Trae Young and then still some questionable fits with Anthony Edwards is how good Anthony Edwards has become on ball as a shooter and as a facilitator. There's some question there, right? And so as of right now, that we do know the Wolves don't view necessarily Rob Dillingham or don't feel very comfortable or confident in Rob Dillingham becoming the next point guard to replace Mike Conley. So they are going to try to go out and get that. But it seems like right now Minnesota is prioritizing a more affordable point guard. So then they switch to Brooklyn, right? Brooklyn, who has their own first-round pick this season. They won't have it in 2027. So it seems like they don't have an interest in doing anything that's going to take even more picks off the table for them. And that makes sense for the Brooklyn Nets as well. Now, they do have Michael Porter Jr., who they could very well trade at this trade deadline, but it doesn't seem like anything's imminent. Doesn't seem like they're pressing necessarily to make a move because they realize they're far away and they do want to use this time period to bottom out, stack draft picks, those type of things, get a bunch of lottery picks and hope that some of those guys are going to hit and become stars for that team. The other team reportedly that has an interest in Young but isn't necessarily pursuing him yet is the Sacramento Kings. It goes on to say this: the Sacramento have been speculatively linked to Young in the past, but they have no longer in the case under Scott Perry. Levine's representation at Clutch Sports reportedly tried to build support for a trade of their client to the Hawks for Young in the offseason, but the Kings weren't interested. So It seems like right now the Washington Wizards are the only confirmed team to have a serious interest in Trae Young. And as things stand right now, we'll see if that deal ends up happening. The last topic before we get up out of here, continue the trade conversation, is Zion Williamson. This article comes from Clutch Points, in which they point out some teams that could be interested in Zion as the trade deadline nears. The writer on this one is Chris Dodson, who reported this, and we're going to break it down and my thoughts on it right here. So when you look at the handful of teams they have listed as being possibly interested in the Pelicans, is first the Hornets. Reportedly, this one, the Hornets stand out as the most natural fit, especially with 5 picks in the next 2 drafts. Williamson's return to North Carolina carries both basketball and personal logic, offering proximity to his college roots and a familiar support system. The Hornets need a franchise-altering talent and possess the draft capital to make a credible offer. They also have the flexibility to reshape their roster around a new centerpiece if they choose to pivot from LaMelo Ball. The Hornets are an interesting case, right? Because you look at just the players that they've passed up on the draft, it's damn near an all-star team. And they just don't usually track free agents. So a trade like this, if they want to move on and try to reconstruct their roster, it makes some sense on paper. I think just the overarching thing in all these teams that we're going to mention is the health of Zion is a factor in that. The next team is the Portland Trailblazers. Now, we do know the Trailblazers are in win-now mode. Now, they're not winning necessarily a huge amount of games, but they are in a state where they are trying to win now. They did re-sign Dame Lillard, who won't play for them until next year, but this is a Portland Trailblazers team that's tough. Right now, they're the 9th seed in the Western Conference. They have to go through that play-in, which take from that what you will. But it's watching what the Blazers do at this deadline is going to be important, because it could signal to us how much they really want to make a move to getting to the playoffs, and how much of it is that they want to get to the playoffs, but they're more patient in waiting on the natural progression of their players, like Denny has done, to get there. Now, they do have players that they can trade. They got the contracts they can match. They got some picks, so they do have that. They don't have the level of picks that some other teams have, but especially with their first-round pick being basically protected to the lottery, protected to the Bulls until 2028, but that's something to look out for. The other team that's mentioned here in this article is the Brooklyn Nets, and saying this, the Nets are positioned as a team with a lot of future draft capital but no definitive star. A year away from being a year away, with pressure to generate buzz and ticket sales, the Nets could justify a buy low swing on a former top pick if the price reflects the risk. And this comes down to, what do you have to trade for him? In this article, they point out Michael Porter Jr., Cam Thomas, and a 2027 draft pick, but then you can't trade Cam Thomas. So there you go on that one. He has a no trade clause. So that's where the writer's missing some things. But a deal built around Michael Porter Jr.'s contract and a 2027 first-round pick, could it get you there? We'll see. And then the last 2 teams that are mentioned are the Kings and the Clippers. And basically just because those teams are just looking for something for their franchise, and it makes a lot of sense there. I don't know what the Clippers are planning on doing right now. They're one of the oldest teams in the league. They've been playing better as of late, but then again, you can't bet on Kawhi's health. So there comes that part. The Kings, who the hell knows what the Kings are doing? Like, the Kings, they're so far removed from the Light the Beam team, it's actually pretty sad. But, we'll see what the Kings end up doing in this. I don't have a lot of hope, but we'll see what the Kings do. And then I did say that was the last 2, but there's another one. They do list the Milwaukee Bucks here, right? Now, would this be the final swing? If the Bucks try to swing and get Zion to add to Giannis, to add to Turner, not to say that it does anything for the three-point shooting, but in this one they say Kyle Kuzma and Bobby Portis for Zion with the first-round pick that they can trade. They have one tradable first-round pick. It gets interesting, because then but then again, what's the fit of a Giannis and Zion Williamson going to look like on the basketball court? I don't know what that'll look like, but we'll see. Zion is probably going to stay put. We'll see. I do think the Pelicans are eventually going to have to get to the point like where the Hawks have gotten to, where they realize you're not going to get a lot back. It's just about what that clears for your roster. You're going to get something back, but it's not necessarily just about the haul. It's about clearing the space on your roster and kind of providing more of a focus with how you're building your team. And if they reach that point, maybe the Bucks could become interesting. That would be a crazy swing to happen there. But let me know what you guys think on that and all the rumors that we talked about today. But that's my time for today. Let me know, guys, what you guys think down in the comments. Where does AD end up? Does Trae actually get moved? And who and which team should gamble or Zion Williamson? Like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. You can follow us at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. NBA Central Show @gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. And thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, I see you guys tomorrow. The next time I feel like making a video, which will probably be tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.